wait until 5 past, see whether or not anybody else joined us. We've had a couple more of you join us during the couple of minutes we've been waiting, so hopefully we will have a few more who will be joining us in the near future. So today's session is the final session looking at the assignment for Unit 712, Strategic Human Resource Planning. And we will be, it's a bit of a different session today because today's session is very much about you. It's for you to have a chance to raise any concerns that you had. Were there any tasks that you found particularly hard? Were some harder than others? Those kind of things. What were the challenges? And then it will also be down to your colleagues, the other students, to sort of have their views heard, that say, well, I think it would have been useful if you'd looked at this maybe as some suggestions. So it's not just down to me to make suggestions. But before we do that, I just want to pick up on something from last week's session, because I know that one of the things that was raised last week was the issue of Turnitin. And as I said to you, it's not something that I have any influence over at all. However, I did contact the college to raise the concern with them, and the response I got back was, we know that the students have this issue, but we are not a big enough university to be able to offer this to the students. Also, there are many websites that have this service individually for free, such as Grammarly, which is recommended from our side. So basically, the response that has come back is, yeah, they are aware of the situation, but it's not something they are in a position to tackle themselves or address themselves. So the suggestion is that in order to carry out the checks on your assignments before you submit them, you need to run them through Grammarly, which will carry out a number of checks. It will obviously do spelling and grammar, which is always a very useful addition to doing a spell check in Word, and it will also do a plagiarism check, and it should give you a report on that. So as I said, last week, it's not something that I have any influence over, but I have raised the question, as I said that I would, and that is the response that came back from the college. So, as I've already mentioned, today's session is different. It's not going to be me talking or answering any specific questions, mainly, although obviously I will be very happy to answer anything that is raised, but really it is your opportunity to raise any concerns you have regarding Unit 712, the Strategic Human Resources Planning assignment. One thing I would like to make very clear is that is the only topic we will be looking at. I'm not going to look at any other assignments, and if there are any other issues that you have in relation to things with the college, then that you need to raise them individually with the college. I have no influence on those factors. So like I say, it's now really over to you. This session will take as long as it needs to take, to be honest with you. And it's up to you to share anything that you have found hard regarding this assignment, and also for any of your colleagues to then give some suggestions, give some pointers from their perspective. So as I said, it's really over to you. I will be sitting here regardless. I have, if needs be, if none of you have any questions that you want looked at, I have a book to read, so I will be reading my book on a strength focused guide to leadership, because someone's asked me to do some training on strengths focused leadership, so I thought I'd better read up on the topic. So like I say, I have my book to read. If I don't have anything raised from you, if we do have anything raised from you, we will deal with that well ahead of me reading my book. So yeah, my book is very much secondary. It's just there just so that I've got something to do if I end up sitting here for 2 hours. So as I said, over to you now. It's up to you. you know, any concerns that you have that you want to raise, and we will do our best to address them. If you don't have any concerns regarding this assignment, if you're very comfortable with what you've done with the assignment, then that also is absolutely fine. And in my opinion, I would say that if you have no concerns relating to assignment 712, as that is the only topic that we will be covering today, then you are very welcome to leave this call. I won't be in the slightest bit offended, and you can go and enjoy some time with your family, or doing some work on other assignments, or whatever you wish to do. So, as I said, it's over to you now to influence how this session goes. So I will just respond if you want to, you know, come off chat, you know, put anything in chat, or unmute yourself and have anything. So we have Saeed has put down he'd like to explain more on the theory of HR in strategy management. Well, there is sort of two ways of looking at this, if you like. The first one, I think I've got a graphic that I want to, that I think will be useful. Just bear with me. No, the planning structure, but I suppose that, you know, the planning structure is relevant. No, it's not the graphic. Sorry. It's that one, I think. Yeah, and this one I think certainly is of use. Before we start looking at that, what is the role of HR in strategy management? And as I've said previously, the biggest role of HR is they are the function that enables Isan, I'm not ignoring you. We will come back to that. But first of all, I'm dealing with this question from Saeed, but I will come back to the question that you have asked. So don't worry, we'll look at task 2.2 in a few minutes. In order to deliver the operational strategy, in order to deliver anything in business, you need people. And it's not just about having quantities of people, it is very much about having qualities of people. It is about having the right quantity of people with the right skills to enable you to deliver your strategy. So what you need to be able to do is, as part of identifying your strategy, now whether your strategy is we are going to grow our business by 10%, whether it is we want to acquire 50 new customers, whether it is we want to acquire some different organizations. That last one I will come back to because that's a slightly different one. But if it is anything to do with growing the business, whether it is growing the number of customers, whether it is growing the number, you know, growing the profit, or whether it is growing the number of products you offer, you need to make sure you have in your organization employees with the skill set to enable you to achieve what you are looking for. As a simple concept, if you are running an organization and you decide that you want to grow the profits or the customer base of that organization by 10, 20%, it is unlikely you will achieve that purely with your existing headcount, your existing employee population, because generally speaking, your employee population are working at a maximum. So you therefore need to look at what skills do we need our new employees to have? Do we just need to bring in junior staff that we can develop, or do we need to bring in people with an existing skill set? So all the way through, if you look at what your organizational strategy is, supporting it has to be the HR strategy. And the HR strategy looks at a number of focus areas, specifically what is the gap between what we currently have and what we need to enable us to deliver this growth in the organization, or whatever it is. It could be that the simple gap is we need 10 more people. We need to take on 10 junior people that we can use in the business to develop going forward. There you go. There is your gap analysis. It could be that we need to recruit X amount of people who have such and such a skill that we do not currently have in the business. There is another gap analysis. So the basic thing is, what you have to be able to do is to identify what you need to enable you to deliver your strategy in terms of resource, in terms of knowledge, and you need to work with your human resources department to enable you to deliver on that. So one of the key roles that HR supports organizational strategy is by ensuring it delivers the people side, who can then deliver the operational strategy. You will also have, there was one separate one I mentioned and I said I would come back to, and the separate one is acquisitions or mergers. It varies, but even when you have a merger, there is always one partner in the business who feels they have been taken over by the other one. There's always one who feels like they are a junior partner. Sometimes you will decide that, okay, I'll give you, I'll hit pause and I'll restart that. I used to work for an organization, a large French environmental services organization, they went for organic growth. They would develop new or develop existing business lines, but they would also think, right, we need to go into that. Sorry, Saeed has made an observation. That's very true. I will come back to that. There were other times they think, right, we need to establish a presence in this sector overnight, and they would go out and they would buy an organization who already operated in that sector. They were a large organization, a large global organization, and therefore they had significant financial influence. They had influence with banks in terms of being able to get good amounts of loans, so they could go out and buy organizations. Now, when you buy organizations, you have to go through various HR processes. One of the things we have in the UK, again, I don't know if you have it in whichever country you are in, there's something which is called TUPE, and that is the transfer of undertakings from previous employment. So if you take over an organization, one, you have to take all of their employees, and two, you have to honor the benefits that they were in. So there has to be an awareness of what are the difference in terms of salaries, benefits, etc., between your existing employees and your new employees. You cannot just bring in the new employees from a different organization and put them onto your packages. You can put them onto your packages, but there has to be a negotiation process. You have to induct them into how you do things, because every organization does things differently. So there becomes a huge role for the human resources department if there is any kind of acquisition or merger. Relating to what we've been talking about, and don't worry, Hassan, I haven't forgotten your observation. So, Saeed has said sometimes you can use daily paid contracts staff and at outstanding. Absolutely, you can very often, if you are looking to bring in particular expertise, you may not want that expertise for a permanent time. You may just need it short term. So you therefore go out and you would hire somebody who works freelance or who works on a contract basis, whether they just come in and they do 1 or 2 days, whether they come in and they work on a 3-month contract or whatever. So yes, there are all sorts of factors. It's not always about bringing on board permanent employees. Sometimes you can bring on board, short-term employees. I'll give you a simple example. I run my own business. Admittedly, the business is just me. I outsource the finance. I have an accountant who I work with. Basically, once a year we work together, because when they have to do my annual tax return. Outside of the year, that period, I don't use them at all. So I only ever pay them for the work that they do for me for my annual tax return on an agreed rate. Because if I was to do it myself, it would be a disaster. So that's an example. Organizations can have people who work for them just on freelance on occasions. They can have people who just work for them on a fixed term contract while they're delivering on a project or whatever. So it's not always about, recruiting people. It could be, in order to bridge the gap between where we are and where we need to be, we need to bring somebody in with this skill set for 3 months to set up that process, as examples. So in terms of how does HR fit in with organizational strategy, the crucial thing is, without people, organizations cannot deliver. It sounds so blindingly obvious, but it is remarkable the number of businesses who do not stop and think about the human aspects. You have to have people in your organization, and you have to have the right people with the right skill set on the right salaries to enable you to be profitable. So there is one aspect. There's one other aspect, so I just want to share this graphic with you. So if you like what we've got here, this is just looking at the process from the perspective of, it's called workforce planning here, but it's the HR planning process. And as you can see, what it's actually identifying is what I've just talked about. First of all, we have the assessment of the organizational strategy, and we look at what are the workforce implications. What resource do we need to deliver that? We then look at where we are, looking at things like a SWOT analysis. One thing I would say about this, it's not just about conducting a SWOT analysis. I will never forget the lecturer on strategy from when I did my master's degree, who was absolutely adamant, and I think he was right, that you should never conduct a SWOT analysis in isolation. Because if you look, for example, you've got the 4 aspects of SWOT. I'm sure you all know what they are. You've got strengths and you've got weaknesses, you've got opportunities and you've got threats. Strengths and weaknesses are internal to the business. Opportunities and threats are external to the business. If you want to get a proper assessment of the opportunities, you need to move beyond just thinking about opportunities and threats. You need to tie it in with something like a pestle. So you're tying it in with looking at what is the political landscape, what's the economic landscape, what's the social landscape, what's technology, what's the legal, and what are the environmental factors. See all of these things, and then you get a far better O&T. Also, one of the biggest challenge with a SWOT analysis is it's normally done by one person. So the outcome will be influenced by one person. So you need a SWOT analysis, absolutely, because that helps us get our gap analysis, but you need it to have input from a number of different people from a number of perspectives. So we've got our SWOT analysis and we look at supply and demand. What have we got? What do we need? That then enables us to perform the gap analysis. Where's our staffing gaps? And then we look at what do we do regarding closing them. Do we just recruit new staff? Do we just focus on training our existing staff? Do we look at making sure we have proper retention strategies in place, which I'm sure I've spoken to you about before? One of the problems you get in most organizations is a retention strategy only tends to come into play when somebody resigns. Then it's, oh my God, what are we going to do to try to keep this individual? That is not a retention strategy, that's a panic. So what have we got that makes people not want to leave? How are we appraising them? How are we identifying potential? Are we using things like the 9-box grid for succession planning? Are we identifying people who are ready for promotion now, people who will be ready for promotion in 6 months, and all of these kind of factors? So there's a lot going on sort of underneath the iceberg, if you like. And once we've done all of that, we can then review, evaluate it, review it, and saying, is it enabling us to deliver our strategy? Or are there other factors that are preventing us delivering the strategy? Are we failing to deliver the strategy because there has been a global pandemic? Are we failing to deliver the strategy because there have been, there's been a global economic collapse? Those are not related to the HR function. You can't blame HR for that. So there's always a case of evaluating how things are going and why things are going wrong. So hopefully that has covered off to an extent what you need to be thinking out about HR strategy. The crucial factor is the role of HR is to ensure you have the right number of people with the right skills to enable you to deliver your business strategy. So they have to be a partner in the strategy setting process. You cannot set your business strategy, not consult with HR, and then wonder why you're not delivering the strategy. So hopefully that has covered off for you what you were asking about, Saeed, in terms of how does, what's the role of strategy, of HR in strategy management. The other question is being related. Isan has asked to give us some examples about assessment criteria 2.2. Now the challenge, oops, sorry, I've got a new message. Yes, absolutely, Saeed. HR strategy underpins, supports, is, if you like, the foundation for the main company strategy. If you don't have a proper HR strategy, you will never be able to deliver the main company strategy because you won't have the right people with the right skills at the right time. That's what the HR strategy is to do. It is to deliver the main company strategy. So coming back to the issue raised by Isan, can you get, asking for examples regarding assessment criteria 2.2? This is, I mean, I'm very happy to give you some guidance here, but the challenge I have is that I've said all along, you need to make sure that you are looking at what are relevant local pieces of legislation in the country that you operate in, so that they become relevant to your organization. Because I am not an expert, but I have a fairly reasonable working knowledge of UK employment law. So I can give you some guidance in terms of assessment criteria 2.2, but the challenge is the guidance I will be giving you will be based on UK employment law and may not necessarily be 100% relevant to the types of employment law that you will have in place in your individual country. So if we look at assessment 2.2, it asks you to identify approaches and methodology to support the recruitment and selection of staff, and that is external candidates. Then it's not looking at internal candidates here, internal promotions or transfers. So looking at the selection of external staff and the impact of current legislation on organizational requirements. So there are a number of things that you need to consider. And once again, I'm just going to stress this is UK employment law I'm talking about, because if you are operating in whichever country that you are operating in the Middle East, whether you're operating in, you're in Lebanon, or you're in Jordan, or you're in Oman, or you're in Saudi, or you're in the Emirates, I don't know the legislation there. Now, in UK employment law, we have what are called, they are 9 protected characteristics. And this is all to do with discrimination. You may not discriminate against somebody on the basis of their age. There's one of the first ones. And that's not just about old people. It is also about young people. I have seen any number of organizations, and I've even worked in ones where they have said, we cannot recruit anybody who is under the age of 21 because we are not able to get them insured to drive a company vehicle if they are under the age of 21. It turns out that is what we always refer to as being an urban myth. There is no truth to it whatsoever. It was perfectly possible to insure somebody to drive a company vehicle under the age of 21. So what you'd actually got in this organization is this urban myth had started somewhere at some point and had become common practice, that everyone thought you could not recruit people under the age of 21. It was blatantly illegal because, fortunately they were never challenged on it, and it wasn't intentionally illegal. It was generated from a misunderstanding. So you could not use that. You couldn't say, sorry, I am not able to recruit you because you're under the age of 21, because you would then be potentially breaking one of the protected characteristics of discrimination law. Now, in another industry, the security industry, people look, when I say security, I mean security of premises. I don't mean personal security. I don't mean personal bodyguards or whatever. I mean the people who, in the UK, we would refer to security as the people who work on reception in large office blocks. They would be the security officers who patrol the premises when it is closed to make sure nobody breaks in. Those sort of. Now, in the UK, that is a regulated industry. You have to have a license which is issued by the Security Industry Authority, a body. Have the license, you cannot work in the industry. To get a license, you have to be over the age of 18. There is legislation that states you cannot get an SIA license if you are under 18. So therefore, if you work in the security industry, to not employ somebody under the age of 18 acceptable, because it is called overriding legislation. In the other industry I talked about, they could not recruit someone who was under the age of 21 because there was no valid reason for it. I am not 18 or 21. I am considerably older. In fact, I am in my 7th decade. Well, I'm in my 6th. I was 60 my last birthday. It's fine. So theoretically, in 6 or 7 years, I will be in a position to retire, but I don't have to. So if I was to apply for, let's say in 4 years' time, I'll be 64. I was to apply for a job. They couldn't say, well, we're not going to employ him because he will only be able to do the job for 2 years before he retires. Can't do it. That is current legislation that impacts on recruitment and selection. You cannot discriminate against somebody because of their age. We also have something that has happened for far too long in the UK and probably in other countries as well, is that women have been discriminated against for becoming pregnant. Pregnancy is not an illness, it is not a disease, it is not contagious. If somebody you work with gets pregnant, you cannot catch being pregnant off them. I'm sure we all know that. But it is far too common in the UK. You see it in the press, on a regular basis, about somebody being dismissed from their employment because they were pregnant. And you cannot do that. If somebody applies for a job and they are, for the sake of argument, 6-7 months pregnant, first of all, they do not have to, by law, tell you they are pregnant. I grant that if somebody is sort of 7 months pregnant, it may be fairly obvious, but you cannot ask them, are you pregnant? And they do not have to tell you. Also, you cannot not employ them for being pregnant. And this is, this is all to do with trying to prevent employers mistreating people, women, well, not people, sorry, of course they are people, but mistreating women who are pregnant, because guys, we can't get pregnant. So, and it's scary how often it happens. So there you have straight away 2 things. You cannot discriminate against somebody during the recruitment process. You can't discriminate against somebody due to their age, whether they are young or whether they are old. If they are under 16, you probably can, because most people, that they should still be at school at that age. But if it is to take on a paper round, it's a different discussion. You cannot discriminate against somebody on the grounds of pregnancy. There are all sorts of other pieces of discriminatory legislation that we could go into. But the big thing to be aware of, and again, this is in terms of UK legislation, if I apply for a job, I have the protection of the law to stop the company I have applied to discriminating against me from the moment I email in my resume, my CV. I don't say email because that's what we normally do. We normally just email it. Sometimes we'll send it via our website. But even if they never interview me, even if they just rejected me at the first stage without ever seeing me, without doing a telephone interview, which is perfectly, it does happen. I, in UK law, have the right to take them to court for discrimination if I feel I have been discriminated against, if I think the reason that they have not put me forward is because of my age, because of my gender, because of my religion, whatever it is. I obviously need to be able to specify what the reason I believe is, not just I think they've discriminated against me. So we have a very, very simple process in terms of recruitment in the UK. And I would say that this is a process that should apply in every country in the world, because it's a nice, simple and easy process. For every single job, you should recruit and recruit the best person for the job, and be able to demonstrate that they are the best person for the job. Be able to demonstrate why you have recruited person A over person B and person C. What is it that sets person A above those two? If you recruit and can demonstrate that you have recruited the best person for the job, you never have to worry about legislation. So in terms of legislations, you need to think about, are you operating processes that could potentially be discriminatory? Another simple one, if we look at in the UK, there will, and again, this is to do with mothers of school-age children, you will find that there are any number of mothers who, first of all, will work full-time, and that's perfectly fine, no problems at all. But you would also find there are mothers of school-age children who will work part-time, will maybe not start work until 10 a.m. and then finish work at 2:30, just as examples. And the reason for this would be so they could take their children to school for 9 o'clock. They could possibly start at 9:30, and they finish at 2:30 to enable them to collect their children from school at 3:15, dependent on the school. If, as an example, you only ever conducted interviews for new recruits at 9 a.m. or 3 p.m., that would be potentially discriminatory, because you are not providing equal opportunity for people who want to work part-time and have school-age children to attend interviews. So those are a couple of examples. The crucial thing is, as I've said all along, you need to make sure that you have an awareness of what are the HR laws that are relevant in the country in which you operate as a business. It could be, for example, that you have, okay, it's an area that's up in the air at the moment because of Brexit, but there is something in European law which is called the Working Time Directive. And the Working Time Directive stipulates that there is a maximum number of hours that people can work in a week. Now, it is worked out as an average over a period of 13 weeks, because we will have ridiculously busy weeks where we do extra hours. And the actual, from memory, I mean, I'm not having worked with working time for a long time, it is 60 hours a week. Is the maximum people can work. And there's also regulations in there that if you work a night shift, you have to have a break of 12 hours before you work a day shift, and various things like that. So you have to make sure that when you recruit somebody that you comply to that legislation, that you are not recruiting people and asking them to work more than the legal maximum number of hours. Now, there is, or there in the UK, you can, as an employee, sign an opt-out that says, I am happy, one, I am aware of the Working Time Directive, and two, I am happy to work above and beyond it. So you wouldn't have to say, I'm happy to work 62 hours a week or whatever, but you have said, I am prepared to work beyond it. So you can sign that, so you can say, I'm happy to do it. Your employer cannot force you to sign it, and they cannot terminate your employment if you do not sign it. So that is another piece of employment legislation. So if you were recruiting somebody and say, I want you to work more than whatever the legal maximum number of hours are, if you have such legislation, and they said, well, I'm not prepared to do that, I'm only prepared to work up to that, you could not employ them. So those were a few examples of the type of things that would be impactful in assessment criteria 2.2. What you need to think about is what are the laws you must observe in terms of how you manage and treat people at work, and how can we make sure that when we are recruiting people, we are sticking to those laws, we are treating people fairly. So hopefully, Ihsan, I hope that answers the question for you as much as I can. But it is, like I say, it's just being aware of what's good. I'm pleased if someone says thank you, then I'm always happy that I've managed to answer it. But like I say, what I really do recommend is that you don't look at British legislation, because that's not relevant to you. You want to look at the legislation of the country that you work in, the country that you operate in. So, like I said, this session is very much up to you. If there are any of the tasks or any of the specific assessment criteria that you're not comfortable with, that you want to raise and discuss, this is your opportunity to do it. If you are quite comfortable with the assessment criteria and the tasks, you don't have any concerns, then again, that is also absolutely fine. And like I said, if you don't have any questions, you don't feel the need to be here, you are very welcome to leave the call. I won't be in the slightest bit, upset. I will fully understand. As I've said, I will be here until 5 p.m. UK time. I think that's 7 p.m. for you, but I will be here another hour and a quarter. So if you leave and then think, oh, I wish I'd asked, you can leave and then rejoin and ask the question. It's entirely up to you how you want to do it. But like I say, I will be here if you have any questions you would like to ask. Okay. Oh. Now, when you... Sorry, Syed has just asked if there are no individual questions. Could I explain the assignments as a whole? What specifically do you mean by that? Would you like me to just give you an overview on the whole of assignment 712? Just give you a quick overview just on all three tasks on what I think these should be included. Is that what you mean by that, Syed? If you could just clarify that for me. The main idea of each point. Yeah, I can do that quite happily. Quite happy to go through it. Some of it will be quite quick because some of it we've actually already covered. But I'm very, very happy to just go through I'll go through the sort of the key points in the 6 separate assessment criteria. If we look at assessment criteria 1.1 and 1.2, first one being critically assess the strategic importance of current, future and anticipated HR requirements. And then assessment criteria 1.2, analyze how HR planning impacts on the strategic plan. We have focused on, in the original question that was asked here, we had a good look at the future and anticipated HR requirements. And we did look at how HR planning impacts the strategic plan. The basic thing there being you have your strategic plan and then the HR bit comes into play afterwards to enable you to actually deliver the HR plan. So I'll just turn my email off. If we look at current HR requirements, I mean, we haven't really talked overly about current HR requirements because there's two factors involved in it. One is, you know, as part of current HR requirements, what's the strategic importance? We need to make sure that we are delivering on the status quo, if you like. We know that our budgeted headcount is 75 people for the sake of argument. How do we forecast HR requirements? We forecast HR requirements by having an awareness of strategy and also having an awareness of market conditions, if you like. One thing that you will find if you go and talk to HR people in depth, they will have a lot of labor information in respect of they will know what market rates are for each job or each type of job. They will know. I don't know what job you work in, but let's say for the sake of argument, at random, I will just pick it. You are a finance manager. In a large, or in a large organization, and by a large organization, I mean an organization which has more than 200 employees. There's an indication. So if you were a finance manager in a large organization of over 200 employees, they would have an idea or be able to know how to find out what the likely salary expectations are for people in that job. Because what you could find is you are having a high staff turnover in a particular job, and that is because you are not paying market rates. So they need to ensure that they are, first of all, managing the HR budget. Yeah, of course, the HR budget is the responsibility of each individual manager. You are responsible for your own payroll budget, but HR has the global responsibility, if you like, in the whole organization. That they need to be aware of. Yeah, they need to have a say in the setting of the HR budget, which is part of the strategic plan, because they're saying this is what we need to enable us to recruit. You've lost me there, Saeed. Sorry, you put by WFP. I'm not sure what you mean by WFP. I'm sure when you explain to me, it'll be blindingly obvious, and I just think, how stupid was I not to realise that? But if you could just explain what you mean by WFP, I'd be very, very helpful. We need to understand, all of these kind of factors. We also need to, we need to understand what is the likely level of staff turnover. Workforce planning, sorry, yes. Of course. Yeah, I now feel really stupid because I should obviously have got that, because on that graphic I showed you just now, it was talking about WFP, but I just didn't think. You have to have a planning on your workforce. You will know what the average turnover is in your organization. You will know what the average turnover is in each department. And these are really incredibly important figures because that will help you planning your workforce, you will be able to think about, okay, that function, we generally have, we have a turnover of one person per year. So it's not a high concern. You have a turnover of 3 or 4 people per year. So, and if it's 3 or 4 times the average turnover, that tells you other factors that you need to be aware of. It tells you there are factors in relation to the way in which people are managed. So it could be that what we need to do is we need to potentially send that manager on some more training. We need potentially to sit down and actually have some formal interviews with them to try and understand what the problems are and these sort of areas. So HR's role in the current is to ensure that we are able to deliver the business plan as is. So actually, it's not radically different, because the only difference is we are delivering the current business plan as opposed to identifying where the gaps are for the future business plan. So if we look at most organizations, if we take it down to a very, very simple level, business is about making money. I know business is about a lot more than making money, but if you don't make money, your business doesn't exist for very long. So you need to be able to look at how does each function within the business either make or save money. Now you look at HR does not make money. But if HR ensures that your people manage their people correctly, so they are not having to be taken to court for not following correct processes in terms of managing dismissals, terminations, etc. If HR ensure that your people follow the right processes, they are saving money by saving potential fines. So it's quite a hard thing to quantify. What do HR do? Because you can't really put it into a financial value. But they are there to ensure that the people in the business are treated properly and legally, as well as the workforce planning aspect. So it's maintaining the status quo, ensuring things are done properly and legally, and making sure that we have a workforce planning. We have ideas on where we are likely to have challenges in terms of recruitment in the short term. Now, it could be, as an example, that you looked at, HR would be another one where they'd be aware of the fact that in a certain department, 60% of the employees in that department are all within 1 or 2 years of potential retirement. So there's a red flag. Nothing wrong with those individuals per se, but you need to be aware of how can we make sure that we don't lose everyone at the same time and bring in a whole load of people at the same time, because then we have lost not just experience, you've got a huge skills gap. So all of these kind of factors are what HR is there to ensure happens, that the business is basically able to operate. So that covers off assessment criteria 1.1 and 1.2, mainly because in terms of the future and anticipated, we talked about it at the start of today's session. If we come into task 2, again, if we look at assessment criteria 2.2, identify approaches and methodologies to support the recruitment selection of staff and the impact on current legislation, that we've already talked about that, so I'm not going to dwell on that. 2.1, evaluate the current legal requirements influencing an HR plan. Really, that is just taking what we talked about in terms of 2.2 and actually just introducing them. You're talking about the front end of doing it, of talking about, right, what are the laws regarding contracts of employment, as an example? What are the laws regarding disciplinary procedures within the country? What are the laws regarding discrimination within the country? What are the laws regarding working time? Also within working time, one of the other things you have is there will be a legal requirement to a certain amount of holiday. Again, that is stipulated by law. So you have to make sure that you are doing those kind of things for your employers. basically what you need to understand is what are the employment laws in your country, and we need to understand them so that we as managers understand how to implement them in terms of our HR responsibility. It is a common mistake in too many organizations that they think that anything to do with the management of people is the responsibility of HR, and that is not the case. HR are there to provide guidance to you as the manager, but you are the manager of these people. So you are the one who has to ensure they are managed correctly. So you need to have a working knowledge of the law. Once again, they have another responsibility of HR. They need to make sure that you all understand what you can do and what you cannot do. So in most organizations, you actually don't need to worry unduly about the law, because most organizations have it all in place anyway. Most organizations have HR processes that are fairly similar across different organizations. If you were to change jobs or think back to previous organizations you've worked in, and you start thinking about HR practices, there are going to be similarities between organizations, and those similarities are as a direct result of the legal situation, because pretty much 95%, probably even higher, of businesses operate within the HR employment law. So that's task 2. Task 2 is probably the most factual. Task 1 is probably the most analytical. Task 3, I would say, is the one that is most open to you being able to draw on your own experience, because it really will be impacted by your own experience. Assessment criteria 3.1. Critically evaluate how organizational culture affects recruitment and retention of staff. As a general concept, I don't think that organizational culture has a huge impact on recruitment, because the culture, the reputation, the way we do things around here, which is what the organization culture is not something that people who are applying externally are necessarily going to be aware of. But organizational culture does affect recruitment in certain ways, that you will find some managers who like to recruit what we call mini-me's. They recruit somebody who reminds them of themselves, people who have similar experience, people who have similar attitudes, etc. They will think, well, they are like me, therefore they must be good. So what you can then get is you get an organization culture that is just the same all the time. Nothing ever changes, because everyone who is brought into the business is not brought into the business because they are the best person. They are brought in because they are the person that the manager feels most comfortable with. Now, very occasionally, you will have some sort of incident in an organization where staff are not treated well, or there are, inappropriate behaviors demonstrated. Occasionally, that's something like that about in an organization will become public knowledge. They may get into the press, not very often. Then that culture of the organization will affect the recruitment, because people will think, I don't want to work for them. I've only ever heard bad things about them. So to an extent, I don't think there is a dramatic impact on recruitment in terms of organizational culture. There is a huge impact on the retention of staff. There is a very well-known expression. My phone's been buzzing in my pocket. I'm just checking it was on silence. It was. Very well-known expression that we have. Well, it's not just in the UK. I've come across it in the States as well. People use this, and it may well be an expression you're familiar with as well, which is people join organizations, but they leave bosses. Our perception of what it is like to work for an organization is directly influenced by what it is like working for our boss. Because as far as we are concerned, our boss is the organization. They are the person that we have the most contact with. They have the most influence on us in terms of whether or not we enjoy our job. And those are simple facts. Somebody who is happy working for their job, generally speaking, will want to stay working for that person. Now, I'm not saying people don't have ambition. If you have ambition, you want to progress up an organization, that's absolutely fine. Some people are very, very financially motivated. They may want to move on to another organization where they can earn a lot more money. Again, that is absolutely fine. But as a general rule, people who are happy working for their bosses are not looking for a new job, a different job. People who are unhappy working for their bosses are more likely to want to leave and go elsewhere. We do not expect our boss to be our best friend. We do not expect our boss to never give us any, negative feedback as such. We accept that that's their job, but we accept that we want them to treat us fairly, to treat us well, to treat us reasonably. Having a good relationship with your boss will not make you want to stay in an organization, particularly having a bad relationship with your boss will make you want to leave. So there's one of these sort of never really answered questions of is the culture of an organization set by the style of the management, or is the style of management set by the culture of the organization? And the answer is yes to both of them. One of the dangers we get in some businesses that if all the bosses are, really aggressive, really results focused and have no focus on the people side of the business, then that becomes the culture of the business, because in order to succeed, that's the way you have to behave. So it becomes kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the retention of staff is without any hesitation influenced by the relationships that people have with their bosses, which is very much a sort of an indication of organizational culture. One of the big ones here that I think is most relevant is to look at Herzberg's model of motivation. I'm sure you have come across Herzberg, but very, very quickly, Herzberg states that there are hygiene factors, which are things we expect to be present in the workplace. Their presence does not motivate. And there are motivators, which are the things that make a difference. And the motivators are things like, recognition. They are things like, reward for a good job. They are promotion opportunities if you're interested in promotion. They are development opportunities. Those kind of things, that's what motivates people. Now, if the hygiene factors are present, as I've already said, it doesn't motivate you, but their absence demotivates. So that is really how organizational culture can affect the retention of staff. what's it like to work somewhere? If it's a good place to work, people are more likely to want to stay. If it is not a good place to work, if it's a place where people don't feel they're treated fairly, they don't have good relationship with their boss or their colleagues, because that does come into play as well. If those factors are there, then it's going to affect staff retention. People are not going to want to stay somewhere. So that's kind of an assessment criteria 3.1. 3.2 is a really interesting one because there is no right or wrong answer. Discuss the work environment. The work environment influences where personal work-life balance issues and the changing patterns of work practices determine motivation and commitment. Now, we go back to when I first entered the world of work many, many years ago, and probably before some of you were even born, back in the mid-1980s. You couldn't really take work home with you. You could physically take paperwork home with you. You could physically take a folder home with you. But when you left work, really, you left work at work. Sorry. So there was in those days a very clear work-life balance. You left work and then you picked up work the next day when you came back to work. You went home and you have got on with your life. These days, that isn't the case. We all have cell phones, all have mobile phones. Most of us have our work email on our mobile phone. And try as we might, if the work phone, if an email comes in, even if it is 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night and we're at home having a discussion with our partner or our family or our parents or whatever, we will still be tempted to look at that email. We cannot help ourselves. We have moved away from having a clear separation between work and home. So work-life balance is incredibly important. One of the really big things we have had in the UK, and I don't know if it's been a big thing for you guys in the countries that you operate in, there has been a lot of press reports regarding mental health and how people's mental health has been impacted by the past 2 years. A lot of people, they have been at home with maybe one or sometimes no other people, not really had any conversations or contact with other people, and they have really struggled with their mental health as a result of it. Also, because people have been working at home, they are separating to, get a work-life balance. I have been working at home on and off for well over 5 years. I have no issues with it at all. I'm very, very used to it. I have my office, which is where I'm sitting here. And at the end of the day, I turn my laptop off and I leave the office and work stays in here. Having said that, I do check the emails on the phone but that's mainly if I'm waiting for something to come back from somebody. I'll be checking to see whether it has. So I'm not perfect. But you're finding a lot of people, when they've been working at home, they're finding it very, very difficult to separate work and home. They're not getting a work-life balance, and work is genuinely taking over their lives. So work-life balance is a huge, huge thing. People need to be able to have a break. It's good for people to be able to get out and have a walk, take some exercise, do whatever it is they enjoy doing, spend time with friends, spend time with family, get away from work and become a normal, become themselves again, not just a work person. So really, really important. Work-life balance is huge. And as I think I mentioned last week, I think it's in France where the government have passed legislation that you are not allowed to email a another government employee, you can't obviously say to the public you can't do this, but one government employee is not allowed to email another government employee at the weekend, or between, I don't know whether it's something like 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. or something like that, but it's something like that to try to give people the opportunity to switch off from work and have a chance to recharge their batteries. So that's the first bit, work-life balance. I've always believed that it is a management-driven concept, because if it was an employee-driven concept, it would actually be life-work balance, that life comes before work. Life is far more important than work. But that's just a personal observation. It's not based on any valid research, whatever. I've just always believed that. Now, the second bit, the changing patterns of work practices and how it determines motivation and commitment. We have moved in a lot of organizations to what they are calling hybrid working. And hybrid working is about spending time in the office with your colleagues. It is also spending time working from home on your own, or spending time on Zoom calls. It's about having a mixture. Because if there is one thing we have learnt over the last 2 years, it is people can be trusted to work somewhere other than the office. Although, having said that, when you look at people like Goldman Sachs and Deutsche Bank, certainly in the City of London, they are absolutely adamant that all their staff must be back working in the office. So maybe they have trust issues. But a lot of organizations are saying, you can work at home 2 days a week, you can come into the office 3 days a week, or whatever it is. I was on a webinar the other day, and the guy who was running it, Dr. Sam Shriver, who's the head of the Center of Leadership Studies in the US, he said, as far as he's concerned, he doesn't care where his people are, doesn't care where they work, he doesn't care when they work. All he cares about is that they do the work. And I think we are getting towards more of that. That, we do have people who are working from home and have other responsibilities. They could have childcare responsibilities, and the bosses need to be understanding that they don't have to be available between 9 and 5 or whatever the stipulated hours are. What matters is, do they do what they are meant to do over the period of the week and deliver on it? So these kind of changing patterns of work practices, there's also the opportunity to, of getting people to understand that too many Zoom calls is not good for you. It's getting people to understand work is changing to be something you do, not somewhere you go. And different people have different perceptions. There are people who are desperate to get back to the office because they are very much motivated by external factors, and there are other people who are very, very happy not to go back to the office. You are finding a lot of organizations are starting to downsize in terms of their offices. They are going from, I don't know if I did mention this to you before, then I apologize for mentioning it again. But if I think about where my wife works, the lease on their office runs out at the end of May, I think. It's only about 2.5 months, or could be the end of June. They have given notice to the landlord that they will not be renewing the lease, and they are actually staying in the same building, but they're moving from the top floor, where they have an entire floor with somewhere in the region of 65 desks and meeting rooms and things. They're moving down several floors to an area where they, I think, have one meeting room and will have enough room for 10 desks, because that's all they need, because most people are now working from home. When they have their executive meetings, they're actually having them at the chief executive's house, because her house is big enough for them all to meet there. So that's very nice. But all these things, but you look at the change that's making to how organizations operate. It means that organizations are vastly reducing their overheads, in terms of their their utility bill, in terms of their rent, in terms of the depreciation on desks and chairs and all of these kind of things. So there's tremendous things that will make a difference. But people feel that feeling they're being trusted to do the work makes a difference to their motivation and commitment. So the world of work has changed dramatically. The world, it is moving towards this hybrid working model. Different organizations are applying it in different ways. So here's one where you could actually look at, how does your organization support you in trying to achieve a work-life balance? What is it doing in terms of changing patterns of work going forward? Or is it not doing anything? And what do you think it should be doing? So, like I say, the task one is really, I think, more about sort of theoretical analysis, looking at the strategy and how it all sits together and how HR report supports it. Task two is much more about just, these are the laws and this is how it impacts. And task three is being able to look at, what is understanding what organizational culture is, how does it impact on the retention of staff. And just to mention, I had previously said to you, if you want to understand what is meant by organizational culture, there are two particular authors I would refer you to, and I did put them both in chat last week, and they were Edgar Schein, Schein, the one, I'm thinking it's Porter, but I know it's not Porter. It is Charles Handy. So Edgar Schein and Charles Handy are the two authors you want to be looking at to actually get an understanding of a definition of what organizational culture is. So that is my overview on the three different topic areas. So it is now 20 minutes past 4 here, so I think that makes it 20 past 6 with you, I believe. And if it doesn't, I do apologize that my maths is rubbish. My glass of water is empty. I'm going to go and refill my glass of water. You are welcome, obviously, to stay on the call if you have anything else that you want to ask. If there is nothing else you want to ask, if you are now quite comfortable that any queries, concerns, thoughts that you had regarding assignment 712 have now all been covered off. If you're quite comfortable, you are very free to leave the call. You don't feel you have to stay. As I said earlier, I will be here until 5 o'clock my time, so another 38 minutes, so whatever time that for you. I will be here until then, should there be any other questions you want to ask. But as I said, just give me a couple of minutes because I need to go and refill my glass of water.